Welcome to the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast.
Welcome to the Real Estate Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today I have Mr. Scott Kelly, and I'm going to call him the $5 billion man. He just told me something about billions of dollars before we started the podcast officially. And by the way, Scott, I do have a $2 billion man. So you just beat that guy by three.
Well, I'm sure there's a $10 billion man coming. So
Somewhere out there, there's a $10 billion guy, right? So, but anyhow, man, thank you for coming in today, Scott. I appreciate you being flexible with the schedule and being able to modify it at the last minute. So, who is Scott, man? Where do you come from? Who are you?
sure. Yeah, a little background on me, Ricardo. I've been a deal guy for 35 years. I started working on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange in the early 80s, moved to San Francisco in 86, worked as an investment banker, taking tech companies public, did that from 86 to 93. 93, in the midst of the dot-com boom, I launched my first company of three that I exited between 93 and 2000. 2000, I retired briefly, moved from California to Arizona. After a brief stint of retirement, I started another business in sports and entertainment, ran that for 6 years until I sold that. And then at that point in time, I launched Black Dog Venture Partners. And yeah, essentially what we do is we work with early stage technology founders to help them fund, scale, and then eventually exit their business. And, we've facilitated about $5 billion in equity raises. We've helped 30 companies exit in addition to ourselves. I've built an investor network of about 13,000 investors that we've done deals with over that time period. Like we mentioned before the podcast, I moved to Florida about 3 years ago for what I told people was my second unsuccessful retirement. And we run a series of pitch events called VC Fast Pitch Event, where we've raised about $120 million for early stage tech founders from those events. And then I'm also the podcast host myself with the Emerging Managers podcast, where we interview up and coming VC fund managers.
So let's talk about the podcast. I love podcasting, and I've been doing it now since 2016, and I've made a great deal of relationships out of this podcast, like getting to know people like you, right? How do you like? How long ago did you start the podcast?
Yeah, honestly, I started the podcast at the beginning of this year. I had it for about 6 months, and honestly, I own a stake in a podcasting company, and I was asked for years by my partner to launch a podcast, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then there was a really interesting article that came out towards the end of last year, where out of the 3,200 venture capital funds in the United States, 78% of the capital went to the top 25 to 30 firms. And so there was a real opportunity to create awareness for these lesser known, earlier venture capital funds that were getting better returns than these large, venture capital funds. So we launched the podcast. We've done 50 episodes, and basically we interview, early stage venture capital funds, specialty fund managers who invest in certain niches. We just did a podcast recently with several in the prop tech and real estate tech space. So, pertinent to some of the listeners here. And it's great. Like you said, we made some great relationships with some lesser known venture capital firms that are looking for opportunities.
Good. And how many episodes are you in now?
We just finished. I think we're in our 50th or so episode. We do about an episode a week. So we're still new to the process, but getting there.
But that's good. That's pretty consistent. To be honest with you, podcasting is cool when you start, but once you get going, man, it's hard to keep the consistency.
It is definitely a grind. It's interesting that you say that, because it was really exciting in the beginning, and then I realized, I've got to do an interview this week. I've got to do an intro, an outro. It's become kind of come at my second or third job. So
yeah, I used to. I used to put more attention to the intros and the outros and all that stuff, but now, man, I just want to have a conversation and free flow with it. We're on 300 or 400 episode. I'm not sure. We've done a lot.
Right.
We don't put numbers on them anymore.
Right.
We'll just put Ricardo and Scott chopping it together or whatever. So, where are you originally from, Scott?
Well, I'm originally from New York. I grew up on the East Coast, Northeast in New York and Philadelphia. And I was there until, I got my first job out of college. And then I moved to Louisiana very briefly, and then California, the West Coast for
So,
about 30 years.
what
And now,
were you doing in Louisiana?
well, it's interesting. That was my very first job out of college. So I graduated college and I had an opportunity to become a stockbroker in Louisiana. So I was a stockbroker in Lafayette. So if you can think about that, a New Yorker in Lafayette, Louisiana, um,
Makes
and
no sense, but I get it.
it made no sense. And oil was $10 a barrel, so the economy was terrible. But I had some really good luck. I had some really great clients that came from out of nowhere. My first client was somebody I cold called on my third day in the business, gave me a check for $2 million, and then years later helped me fund my startup in California.
Wow, was he in the oil and gas business?
Interesting story. He wasn't originally, so give more flavor on the story. So I was cold called Mr. Abear. He invested $500,000 in municipal bonds over the telephone. And then my boss told me to get in the car and go pick up his check. And so I go to Mr. Abear's house, and it was a metal shack, which scared me a little bit. And then I go talk to Mr. Abear, and he was whittling in his rocking chair some wood and maybe had 7 teeth in his mouth. And he gave me a check for $2 million at the end of the meeting. And I said, Mr. Abear, I don't want to sound rude, but it's not a very fancy house. How'd you get all that money? And then he took me around to the back of his house where it used to be rice fields, was oil derricks as far as the eye can see. And Mr. Abear was generating millions of dollars a month in oil royalties. So,
Wow.
it was a good example of not judging a book by its cover.
Wow. Now, was you said that was your first cold call, right?
It was my third day. I made a bunch of cold calls prior to that. I mean, I was really old school. We were making hundreds of calls a day, talking to people. And it was my second day. Third day rather. I just happened to, land what turned out to be a very good client for a long period of time.
Good deal. Um, did you have a script or something that you followed
Oh,
at the time?
sure. We had a script. Back in those days, you had a script on, the opportunity you wanted to present to somebody, and we had a yellow notepad that we jot down all the objections they had, and then we go back to our managers and review those objections. Yeah, it was old school, smiling and dialing. So
And what was he investing money on? Like, what were you guys selling at the time?
he was investing in municipal bond, which is a loan from a municipality when governments
Oh,
want to.
so you were selling bonds basically and stocks and things of that nature.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were a stockbroker in Lafayette, Louisiana,
Did
shopping
that job
around for local clients.
Yeah, did that job for about a year, and then I moved to California, and then I became an investment banker in California, and basically I worked with companies that wanted to go public on the stock exchange.
Okay, got it. Um, so since day one, you've pretty much been around raising money.
I've been doing that my entire life, and I've trained 1,000 salespeople in my life, so I'm not opposed to asking people to do things they wouldn't normally do.
I love it. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the sales process. What in Scott's world? What number one? What makes a good salesman?
Right. Well, I think, then and now, sales is a lot different. Obviously in the 80s, it was, about just closing people as hard and aggressively as you can. And today, you can do that, but you don't necessarily get the same results. So I think it really comes down to building relationships. Traditional sales is obviously, if you do the numbers, you have to, get 100 prospects to generate 20 calls to get 4 or 5 to buy. But you can increase those odds by building relationship, and obviously social media and other tools allow you to establish relationships. So I think it comes down to, one, having a relationship with somebody, and two, being a problem solver. I think the days of just trying to put a square peg in a round hole, are effectively gone. But there's a lot of square holes for square pegs. You just have to match them.
Right. And what would be, let's say I'm starting brand new today and I want to
Mhm.
raise capital for my company, whatever
Mhm.
company I got, right? What do I need to do to get on the right track?
Well, I think, like I said before, the very first thing you need to do, and I get entrepreneurs ask me this all the time. They say, Scott, I'm looking to raise money. When should I begin my conversations with investors? And I tell them 6 months or a year ago, because it's
Right.
about building those relationships. Because again, you need to make sure you are presenting your opportunity to the right investor, pitching the right investor. One of the biggest problems that entrepreneurs have is if they see someone who has investor on their LinkedIn profile, or they hear that they're an investor, they haven't done their homework. They don't know what stage of companies they invest in. They don't know what industries they invest in. So it's really important to build a funnel of relationships with potential investors that would invest in your stage of company, and in your industry, because it's really pointless if you're a technology company to go reach out to an investor in healthcare, or mining, or something else. So that's the first thing, is really build relationships and have that funnel, have literally hundreds of potential people that you could talk to, that you pre-qualified, because you're going to hear hundreds of no's. And then obviously you need to be ready for the call. We work with companies to put together their pitch deck, which is really a slideshow presentation to show why their investment is a good investment. We help them put together their deal room, which is where you provide all the due diligence for an investors to make an informed decision. So you have to have all that stuff prepared ahead of time too, because if you get past that first call and they say they want more information, you should have that information ready to go. Because if you're not ready, they have 100 to 200 other entrepreneurs they can talk to instead. So it's really, one, being prepared from a marketing and outreach standpoint with qualified investors you should establish a relationship, and then have all your documents and all your tools in place, to present your company properly.
Now let's talk about the business itself, right? Because you've exited businesses before. Um, I've exited businesses, but not because I sold them. I exited them because they didn't work out, or because I thought it was a good time to shut it down. Sometimes you're winning when you shut it down. But what are the foundations of creating a sellable business?
Well, I think when you want to create a solo business, you have to start with the end in mind. And what I mean by that, if you really have to, in the beginning, you have to decide who your potential acquirer is, or who they can be, and then work your business backwards to meet what they're looking for. And then the reality is, you just have to build a viable business with an adequate team. And I think, especially when you're going out and building a business, I think entrepreneurs have to ask themselves two important questions. The first question is, what are you really good at? And if the things you're good at, lean into. But more importantly, what are the things you're not good at? And if you're not good at something, find people that are. I work with a lot of founders that are really good developers or technicians and have great engineering and technical skills, but they don't have sales and marketing skills, or accounting skills, or legal skills, or organizational skills. You need to build a team around you, because at the end of the day, an investor is going to invest in the team executing on the plan, and someone who acquired the company is going to acquire that same team potentially that execute on the plan.
Right. Okay. Um, so once you build a team and you found the talents, uh, what's the next step? Like on building that foundation.
Well, I think on the foundation, it comes down to finding a problem that's a large problem for a lot of people, because that they are going to be your customers. And then once you determine that, you have to figure out, how how you can build a solution that's better and why is it better? Is it faster than what's out there? Is it cheaper? Is it more effective? And I think if you build those two things as your foundation, then you get to work building the team to build the product or service to solve that problem. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs try to you don't really do enough research on the problem, determine if it's a sellable problem. And I think a lot of that comes down not doing your homework in terms of research and competition. Um, a lot of entrepreneurs tell me they have no competition. And I tell them, well, the pencil is still the competition to the computer. So you really have to determine what makes your product and service, a real problem solver, and at the price point that people want to pay for.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of wholesaling, like wholesaling real estate.
Hmm.
A lot of my friends, and I actually do wholesaling as well. They start a wholesaling company, and some of them think they're going to be able to sell it. And honestly, it's very hard to sell a wholesaling business when it's all just sales and marketing.
Right,
There is no know-how protected with IP and things of that nature that
right.
will make the business more valuable. Valuable. Now, businesses like that, Scott. Why other than the IP, right? Why do you think people struggle to sell them?
Well, I think people struggle to sell businesses because they haven't put it together to sell. A lot of times an entrepreneur, like you just mentioned, if they have to come along with the business, it might be more difficult to sell because you're essentially going to go from being the boss to being an employee,
Right.
which for me is not a desirable position to be in. So you have to be able to build the business that can be run by someone else. Build those systems, build the brand of the business that so those things aren't rely upon you, but they're relying upon the business. And so you need to build, with the ability to separate yourself from the business and still be able to run the business.
I attended years ago, well, like 12 years ago, probably a conference. It was more like an education program called the Quantum Leap by New
Hmm.
Peaks,
Hmm.
and they had this program called the Guerrilla Business School. And the one of the things that I took away from that mentorship, or it wasn't a mentorship, it was more of a, I don't know, like a seminar type, was that they every time they said when you're about to build a business, you got to have the end in mind, which is the first thing you said when we started the podcast. And what was that? That is basically selling the business, making the
Right.
business sellable, right? Why do you think entrepreneurs today struggle to have that vision?
Well, I think they struggle that have that vision is because a lot of entrepreneurs just start a business and they try to figure out as they go. And I think what happens is if you begin with that approach, then you are spending so much time inside the business instead of building the business. And what I mean by that is that your day to day and the minutia of operations and tasks that you probably shouldn't be doing. That back to that time when I was a stockbroker, on the second day of my job there, I was licking stamps and sending licking envelopes. And my boss came to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sending this information out to potential clients." And he looked at me and goes, "That's a $5 an hour job. We have someone to do that. We want you to do $500 an hour jobs." And
Yeah.
I think sometimes the entrepreneurs get caught up. They forget the big picture and the large opportunity because they're in survival mode, or they just aren't necessarily willing to do the things that are necessary and give away some control.
Yeah, I agree. I love starting with the end in mind. Like when I sell this business, I will be able to reap the benefits of years of labor or work or putting everything together so it runs by itself, right? Um, Now, based on what you guys have done. Like, let's talk about Black Dog Ventures
Mhm.
for a minute. Tell me about the company and how you guys help other people,
Sure.
raise capital.
Yeah, well, basically, we operate as an accelerator, and so we do two things. I tell entrepreneurs and anyone who we talk to, we do two things: we solve problems and we create opportunities. And sometimes that problem is putting them in front of potential investors, but sometimes that problem is helping them be better at selling their own product or service. We've had cases where companies came to us and wanted to raise, for example, a couple of years ago, a company wanted to raise $2 million, for their business. And I looked at their product and I said, well, let me make a couple of phone calls. And we ended up selling $2 million of their product. And so they didn't have to give away any of the business, didn't have to pay any interest or any collateral. And they effectively got the money they want and were able to grow. And so that's the first thing that we do. Now, if they still need to raise capital, a lot of what we do is that we have an advisory arm that puts together all their pitch deck materials. We will do pitch coaching. We'll help them put together due diligence package for investors, and then we'll put them in front of investors. And we do that in various different ways. We've been hosting our VC Fast Pitch events for 13 years, and so they get an opportunity to pitch to investors either online or in person at different venues around the country and around the world. And then what we do also is then we connect them to our network of investors. And we really, I tell people we are a marketing agency, but we market entrepreneurs to investors.
I love it. I'm in the same business. I'm not the same as raising capital like you, but or teaching people how to do it. Even though I've done it myself. But at the end of the day, you're in the sales and marketing business for entrepreneurs to raise capital. I don't know if you ever met my friend Brad Blazer,
I know the
but
name.
he does something. Say he's the $2 billion man. So I'm gonna tell Brad you're the five. Just kidding. Just kidding. Brad is a great guy. But okay. So do you guys do coaching when it comes
Yeah,
to? Okay. So let's talk about
absolutely.
that.
So we coach them from a couple aspects. Because I've run businesses with hundreds of employees, and I've had to hire and fire people. I've raised capital for myself and exited my own companies. So a lot of times it comes down to just guiding them. And I tell people, after doing this, I'm 61 years old. I've been doing this for God close to 40 years, and the two things I have to really give is knowledge and perspective. And I think the perspective is understanding what happens when you get a no, when you hit a fork in the road. Because being an entrepreneur is a tough job. 90% of entrepreneurs will be out of business in 2 years. 75% of companies that raise venture capital money are out of business in 2 years. It's a tough business. And so part of this coaching is to guide them on how, one, how to raise the capital, and then two, how to effectively and uh, efficiently spend that capital to maximize their growth and revenue, and then really help them along the way in terms of what they want to do in the end in terms of exiting.
Good. Um, do you guys have a community or something along those lines where maybe the students they collaborate with each other, they ask
Yeah,
questions?
yeah, absolutely. In addition to our 13,000 investors, we have 40,000 business partners and entrepreneurs that get our newsletter. Uh, we host webinars free to the public and free to entrepreneurs all the time on all kinds of topics from marketing, taxes, legal. We host on average 2 to 3 webinars a month on various different topics, bringing in other professionals to give them some guidance and coaching.
Okay. Um, and then how do you what's next for you guys for Black Dog? What is it that you guys are looking other than coaching people and all that? What how,
Yeah, I think the next thing for us is that we've been very successful with literally thousands of entrepreneurs. And, we continue to do that. I told you, Ricardo, when I moved to Florida, that was the second time I unsuccessfully retired. I just love working with entrepreneurs. I love building, you know.
right.
So it's not something I plan on giving up anytime soon. I'm a young 61. I can't golf very well and I can't fish every day. So I might as well do something I love.
Right.
But the next thing is really going to be leading into what we're doing with the podcast. We have found that entrepreneurs have a difficult time raising money, but so do venture capital funds. And so we're going to be launching what's called the Emerging Managers Summit. We're going to be going around the country and introducing venture capital firms to potential investors in their fund. That's probably the next step. And we're going to continue to host events. We have an event. We'll be hosting events in Nashville, New Orleans, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, around the country, and then we'll be in Europe and Asia the latter part of next year.
When is your next event?
Our next event actually is going to be in 10 days from the recording of this podcast. We'll be in Nashville on December 11th, and then we will be in Dallas in April. We'll be in DC in February, and then Los Angeles in March.
Usually, how long are your events?
Our online events usually go for about 2 hours. They're online via Zoom. They go from roughly 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time. We have two events that we host. We host VC Fast Pitch, which is an all-day event. It goes from 9 to 5, and we have companies present throughout the day. We have a breakout session where entrepreneurs get to ask investors questions. And then we actually just launched a new event called Investors and Innovators, where we do evening events where they're really kind of networking and cocktail parties to really connect entrepreneurs with investors one-on-one in a low stress, high touch atmosphere.
So, for instance, the one you have in Dallas, you said in April, is that a one-day event or just?
Yeah, that'll be a full day event in Dallas. It'll be again, it starts at 9 o'clock, goes to approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay, and about how many people do you host?
We typically have anywhere from 150 to 200. We keep them relatively small. I've learned that these big conferences are good for volume, but you don't get the quality relationships.
Yeah.
We have several times throughout the day where we will break for networking. And so the entrepreneurs get an opportunity to present their companies to investors, network with those investors and attendees, and then the reality is get some good education in addition to that.
Yeah, the reason I ask you so many questions about events is because I do events as well. So, literally, before I sat here on the podcast with you, I was planning my next event in February, and we do 2 to 3 day events basically.
Okay.
And so we're debating whether we want to do 2 or 3 days. And
We've
there's a
done
reason.
we've done longer conferences, and actually we partner with other events. So for example, if someone does a business trade show for 2 or 3 days, we will bring our VC Fast Pitch event and run our pitch event, bring investors to come to their event and present opportunities to those investors.
Yeah, we do the same. Like actually, in my Attend Growth, it's called Attend Growth, the real estate entrepreneurs event, Attend Growth, and it's for basically for growing. So the the main our avatar for our event is actually an active real estate investor. It's not for newbies.
Right.
So these are guys that are already doing deals one way or another, whether it's multifamily or single family or
Right.
commercial. Um, but they're looking for something else to do,
Mm-hmm.
whether they want to switch lanes or they want to add another lane to their business,
Right.
or they just simply want to get into more a different type of, or what they want to learn how to raise capital, for instance. So
Sure. Sure.
um, we have somebody that comes to our events every single time we do one. He calls me, he's like, make sure send me the invoice because I want to be there. Because of course, he gets students out of it, right? So,
Sure. Sure.
um, so that's why I ask you about your events because I love live events.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't think you can replace a live event. Like the one thing is to do these Zoom calls and to do the webinar, but when you see somebody face to face and there is an exchange of energy, and
Mm-hmm.
now you get to see that the person is real,
Right.
magic things happen.
I
So
agree. I agree 100%. That's why we host both. Because obviously sometimes it's a geography issue, but when it's not, we like to go live.
Awesome. Now, how can people get in contact with you guys?
Sure. A couple of things. You can go to our website. You can go to blackdogventurepartners.com to learn more about what we do. If you're interested in attending our VC Fast Pitch events, you can go to vcfastpitch.com. You can find me on all social media channels at Black Dog CEO. And if somebody sends me an email to Scott at Black Dog VP and they put the subject heading startup tools, I'll give them a free list of all kinds of tools to help them build their pitch deck and raise capital.
Awesome, Scott. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you. If you got something else to say, you got one last thing you want to tell the audience?
Well, I would just tell the audience right now that being an entrepreneur is probably the greatest thing that this country and the world provides, but it's not for the weak. But don't give up.
Thank you so much. With that being said, guys, don't forget to hit share, like, and subscribe. Go find Scott. Go find his websites. Make sure you get all the freebies he's giving you. And with that being said, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much, Scott. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.